material for you?
The material is pretty easy. I'm understanding everything so far. I just need to study more like some terms, like some scientific terms and some processes, because some terms are really new and I need to study more. But I feel like everything is pretty understandable, and the activities we do, like the discussions, they're pretty helpful.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And how about everybody else in the participation booth over here? We have a few.
I agree with Leslie. The material, well, it was a little bit challenging for me for like chemistry, but like with activities, it's kind of like drill and like repetition. And I'm definitely a visual learner, so that was like really beneficial for that one discussion prompt. So I appreciate that.
Good. Which one was that?
It was like explained through pictures.
Oh yeah. Well, that's how I made my material. So I figured I might as well teach it to you guys too, or not teach it, but just kind of remind ourselves of how we can do these things. A lot of these days with the tools at our fingertips, it's mostly about saying like, oh, that's that easy. We could just do it. I mean, I'm like amazed sometimes, especially now with AI. I'm like the amount of stuff that you can do. Of course, you can completely get lost in it too, but it's really cool. And so with the pictures, explaining through pictures, I want you guys use that a lot. Also, some people draw when they do a prompt, so that can also be fine. You can be visual if you're a visual person, also in uploading your work if you have ways to doing it. So be creative if you feel it. I'm totally in for that. How's everybody else doing? Look, there we coming together a little bit. Hello, everyone. Any questions to? Let's go into the material for. Oh, let me put this recorder on too, potentially.
Recording in progress.
Into the material for chemistry material. Any problems you guys came across in the chemistry department that you want to revisit, talk about, explain a little more? No? Well then.
I had my hand raised.
Oh, sorry. Rules of the day. You just interrupt me. You have to just interrupt me because I forget to look hands and all of that stuff. I'm already doing other things in preparation. So yeah, what's going on? Let me.
Yeah, I wanted to know more about like the role of glucose, like that it plays in our bodies, because I couldn't really. I'm sorry, I couldn't really understand it very much, and yeah.
In what we in what we in what I mean, we do the glucose for us is mostly about energy. Is that you got that much?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the biggest component for us in terms of usefulness, is that it gives us energy. That's the glucose thing. And so that's good for that. Now, the problem is we need it. We need a lot of it, but it is also quite an abundant molecule that we have in our system or in our food sources and so forth. And so what happens is with the glucose, well, actually, let me back up. The problem with too much glucose, if it stays in the bloodstream, it becomes damaging. So what we want, yeah, go ahead.
You would say that the glucose is like the bad sugars? Because that's what I didn't understand. So I know that we need glucose, but is glucose the sugar we consume?
The sugar, the bad is the quantity. The amount, how much. That's the bad. It's the same with the salt. The reason why we crave it is in part because it's not always been available to us. It's not always been easy to get these substances. Nowadays, they're too easy to get. But we're still programmed to go like, oh, we want to crave this because if we can get it, we need to get it because tomorrow we might be starving. And so our body still reacts in that way. And so we consume generally too much, and then that becomes the problem. So if the the glucose stays in the bloodstream, it will become damaging. And that's what happens when we get the diabetes problems, because the sugar is no longer being taken into the cell and then used to make energy, ATP.
Oh, okay. Now I understand. I perfectly understand, because I read a part where you wrote, or I read, that something in our system gets tired of processing the glucose like in excess if you consume too much, and that's when you start to like get diabetes and all these diseases.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And so that's the problem with the glucose. So it's really an amount question, right? And that's why the glycemic index is important and interesting, because it tells us how fast does the sugar get released in the bloodstream. And the faster the sugar gets released in the bloodstream, the quicker the system needs to react to bring it into the cells. And over time, that extreme reaction will wear out the system, like in 2010, 15, whatever, how many years, right? And that's when we get older, we get diabetes. That's why it's a slow progression of the disease kind of thing, because we wear out the system over time. Now, if we consume a lot of fiber, for example, and the sugar is bound to fiber, that sugar will get released much, much slower into the bloodstream. And that's why fruits and vegetables are better versus processed, because that stuff is usually bound to more or less some fiber. And so generally speaking, you're still having fluctuations, of course. You still have fruits that are really sugary. You got to be careful if you are diabetic. But generally speaking, you have more fiber attached to those sugars, and they come in natural form versus a processed form.
Okay, thank you so much.
I know, sorry, I'm going off. Huh?
No, it's perfect. Thank you.
Anybody else have any chemistry related things going on that is in your mind right now?
Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning.
So don't walk it.
Huh? Question.
I heard it. Not too good at the moment.
I can't hear you guys.
The storm blew my gate off.
Ooh.
In the front. Huh? The storm.
Hello.
Last night blew my gate off.
Uh-huh.
My gate now is stuck.
Oh, hey. Yeah, I know. I know.
It's off.
I lost reception and all that stuff.
I can't pull it up or down.
Oh, you
have to wait for Mark to get here.
I hope it's going to help. Any questions for the class?
Around the side.
Hello. Any questions?
It just ripped the hinges off.
Hello, who's talking?
It broke the door into two.
Any questions? Sorry, that was not for the class, I think. I'm sorry about that. Any questions to the chemistry chapter in the class? Hello. Sorry about that. So in that respect, I expect you guys understand everything on that front that is on the review. Let's go do that real quick, because I want to make sure, because we're going to have a test coming up. Have you guys noticed that?
Yes.
Good. And so, how you feel about that?
A little nervous, but what can you do?
Okay. I'm sure you're not the only one sharing that sentiment. So, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that I actually feel pretty excited, because that's when we're going to have to show how much we're learning, actually.
Well, yeah,
so nice.
And that's what I like to have it be as much as possible, sort of a last go around. So the tests are open book. Make sure you have, you can see, I'm on the test review here. Can you see that on your screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm looking at the test review. So you can print that out here as a PDF, download it, or you can just look at it on the screen. And every chapter that we talk about, that we go through in the test, is going to be here listed. And let me see, I don't think histology is actually really on it, but chemistry, cytology is on it, and chemistry is on it. So make sure you understand every bullet that is in that review. And if you do, then you're good for the test. And then I try to give you enough time that it's kind of like you can work your way through it, and the only difference is you can't retake it. But it's not the end of the world if you flunk it. We're going to talk about it, and then it's going to be all right. We're going to work through it. The tests are not the full point value. Tests will not make or break you in this class. What makes or breaks you in this class if you stop doing the work. That's usually what breaks people when they get too far behind. But the tests.
Excuse me, Dr. M.
Yes.
How long is the test?
Oh, I gotta look. Hold on. I don't even remember.
The 2 hours?
Something like that.
Okay. I'm just curious. Thank you.
I know. I'll look it up real quick. I can always also change it. Well, I want to make sure everybody has a decent experience about it. Oh, an hour and a half. I have it on here. We can put it at 2 hours as well. That's not a problem at all.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
We'll do that. Let me take a note for those things I'm going to have to do here. Test 2 hours.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely. No, these are, this is really about learning. Well, the other thing is, we got to understand college is supposed to be a good experience, a learning experience, not just like a weed out experience for later on. So what I want to do then, if the chemistry is kind of all right. Oh, and let's see, when is this test? Actually?
Oh, I had one more question, Dr. M.
Yes, please.
Do you know the bullet points of all the concept we just learned? You just showed it to us.
Yes.
Previously. Where do we find that in our module?
So if you go to student view, I should go to student view.
All right. Yeah, because I'm on the Canvas app and I'm having a hard time finding it.
Yeah. Can you see my student view here, my module?
Yes.
So if you collapse all of these things here,
okay.
You're gonna get to the test prompt.
Okay.
And the test prompt is where you have the test review, and inside the test review you can have this. If you have a printer, I'll print it out. But you can take screenshots or stuff too if you need, of these. Just make sure you understand all of this stuff. If you don't, reach out to me. We can Zoom together and I'll explain it to you. It's no big deal. I got the time. We'll make the time. All right, just be
great. Thank you.
Oh yeah. I want you. This chemistry. We don't need to be really all crazy about too many details, and it's that. But we need to have a foundation to sort of get an understanding of how the body works. And so the level that I bring over is not, it's not that deep, but it's deep enough that gets you through. Well, it's deep enough that got me through all of my medical stuff. So I'm sure it's gonna be all right. And so the better you know these points, the less you just glance over them. And the more you're kind of a little stickler about them, the better you're going to be off in all your future studies. Unless you take chemistry, of course, then you go a little deeper. But once you get out of chemistry, the stuff that remains in knowledge is kind of what we did in the class here. What we do now is we're going to go do cytology today and then histology, or that's this week. We don't have to go through all these points here, but we look at cytology, the study of cells. So now we're still in the small arena where we can't really see anything, but we're getting a little bit into things that are more tangible. Next week, we're going to start with the skull and with the facial muscles. So that's going to be much different in terms of way we study, the way it's easier to it's not so much concepts, it's more like structures then. And then my job is kind of to try to make it in a form to help you explain the structures in a way that why do we have them that way? Why are they... why is there a hole in that part of the bone and so forth? And then it hopefully becomes sensible to when we study that. So that'll be the next part. But now we're doing cells and tissues. And so cells is the smallest unit of life. And so cells are the smallest things that can be alive independently on their own. Oh, how is your challenge going? My water drinking is pretty good. Make sure I keep that
Yeah.
that throat not too dry with all that rain. And so we have cells that are independently alive and they function perfectly well as bacteria, for example. But when we look at humans and other animals, we're going to have some trillion time whatever amount of cells, so a huge amount. Um, and so what we do in this chapter is we look at the different parts that make up a cell. We look at and these parts are all listed here. There's a cytoplasm, it's called cyto. Whenever you see the word cyto, you refer to it's a cell. So anything with the make that list. Anything with the word cyto is a cell. Or I mean, you don't have to make the list if it just slowly accumulates. But it's very helpful to know the prefixes and suffixes, or look them up when you don't know a word, because it helps then more understand what things mean, even if you don't necessarily understand a whole word. Because it's a lot of these medical and other sciencey things are made up of prefixes and suffixes. Anyway, cyto means cell, and so that's the cytoplasm is sort of the watery stuff on the inside of the cell, and then the cell membrane is another structure that is the surrounding of the cell. Is very important for an organism to have boundaries and not be just fluid with the environment in order to stay alive. And so the cell membrane does that. And we'll talk a little bit about the structure and how it's made up and so forth. And so it's really cool stuff. Actually, the cell membrane cells are really cool. There is actually a TED talk on the booklets in the back that is about cell division. And they visualize how the cell actually divides, which we have it here, cell division. It shows that it's not a cartoon, but it looks like a cartoon, but it's made in real animation, the way the scientists visualize it. It's the scientists making that. So it's really cool.
Dr. M,
Yes.
you said they have a TED Talk on sales. Is the link listed?
What do you mean is the link listed?
Is the link for the TED Talk about sales, is it listed?
It's on the booklet. It's on the booklet, that one.
On the booklet, okay.
Yeah, it's in the back. Those TED Talks in the back. I don't have a booklet on me. I spaced out putting one up.
No, it's fine.
For me, but it's in the back on those TED Talks. It's one of those, and it's about cell division, and it's really cool because it's really and they realize these are scientists trying to visualize the stuff for themselves, because we just understand it so much better when we see it than when it's just described in some little boring sentence or something. Anyway, that's partly why I'm making picture booklets. So the cell membrane is a piece, and then look, we have all these different names. We have endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi apparatus, lysosome, centrioles, mitochondria, blah blah. These are all parts within a cell that have different functions, that do different works, different tasks, and we sort of describe them and look at them. There's pictures, in the videos and all that, and then visualize them. And basically, at the end, what you need to understand as much as possible, which part inside the cell is doing what. What's their function. For example, the endoplasmic reticulum is where the cell makes protein. We learned about protein in chemistry. It's all these amino acids, and so in the endoplasmic reticulum is basically a place where we have we have factories on them, and the ribosomes are, and then actually the factories that make the protein, and they just stick amino acid after amino acid after amino acid and clip it off, and then a protein is made. So it's kind of cool to see that. It's also kind of cool to go actually on YouTube and find little films for this kind of stuff that visualize it. And if you find a good one, please post it in Padlet or text me, because I need to more make lists of these kind of videos and give them to students as well, because I think the future of teaching this kind of stuff is like you watch videos and then we talk about them, and it's much more animated. Anyway, talking about Padlet real quick, I think something happened with Padlet. I don't think you guys can sign in anymore. I don't know if anybody has been able to sign in. If so, please let me know how, because it's been not working for the most part. So in the meantime, until we figure that out. If we can just all put our names in in the title or in the text of the body, and then we know who's writing what to whom. Please, I'm sorry, I don't know. It's technology, it's great, but then we have to be flexible. Yes.
Yeah, what we have been, or like what I have been doing is just doing it without my name, and I just put my name like on the bottom because it doesn't allow us to sign in like you're saying, so it doesn't work for us either.
Yeah, and so if you could all do that, then that would be great. And I think you have been all doing that. I only had like one or two people that I couldn't give points to when I read through it, and I really like those. They're very helpful for me to figure out where everybody's kind of at, and so please keep those going. If you well, they give you points. Your points, my money, right? Even a little bit. Make sure don't even with the discussions and things. Please know if I don't give you all the points because you didn't reply back to someone, you go back and reply, and I go back and give you the points. If sometimes I'm a little behind with things. There's so many little details, so you can just shoot me a text as well if you're like did it and I haven't updated the score or so in a couple of days, and then I can go add it to it as well, which helps me, reminds me to do it on everybody. Anyway, so the work, the only work you can change and update and get the whole point value is the tests, the 3 tests. So back to the little structures here, these little organelles, they call them. So we have them here. And the other thing you do again is look at the names. You see lysosome. You see lyso means, oops, let's see here. Somebody is not muted. There we go. Lyso means, where am I? Killing or dying or destroying. Lys, Lys, and some always means body. I don't know if you heard before of a psychosomatic illness, for example. That's an illness that has to do with the mind that goes into the body. So when we're like always stressed, for example, and running around like crazy, we will get potentially heart disease because we're always in a sympathetic overdrive in the body, and that the mind does then that gets the body to become a little worn out in that department. And so as we go through it, we'll keep talking about these kind of things. But that's the word. So lysosome are little bodies that are having digestive enzyme in it and destroy foreign material. So there is a sensibility to what it's called, to what it actually does. So that's basically what I wanted to connect these two. And then, in the text, you have pictures to it. The mitochondria is the coolest one. That's the one that makes energy, the ATP power plant part. Well, the other way I look at these things is like, it's like a little village, and you figure out, what do you need in a little village? Well, you need a power plant. I mean, not a little village, but you need power somehow, unless you have a big storm. And so you need a power plant to make energy. That's ATP. And then what else would you need? You would need a factory to make stuff. That's your ribosomes that make the protein. You need the endoplasmic reticulum, and that what actually that does, it transports things around, it moves things around inside the cell, and it packages it, which actually then happens in the Golgi apparatus. So that's the post office. You wrap things up, a protein that needs to go to the outside. Let's say you make red blood cells or something, needs to go into the bloodstream. You can package stuff up. Well, the red blood cell is not the right thing. That's actually a whole cell. But other substances, and so you have a post office. You have a sewer plant that can destroy things that come in from the outside that we don't want. A lot of the cells that create pus ultimately that come and help us not have foreign things when we have a cold come in and give us infections. The neutrophils, they call them, those are filled with these lysosomes, and those are the things that then kill the substances. And so they are very useful, and of course. And then we have, so those are pretty much the mains. The centrioles are small little like magnet things that help us when we have a cell division. So you'll see those in cell division. And then the other thing we got going on in the cell, we have, of course, the DNA in there. We have the genetic material. And so we talk about the different DNA. And then we also talk about RNA, which is the DNA is a double-stranded helix carries, that holds all the, it's like a cookbook, holds all the information about all the protein production of all that proteins we make in it. And then when we need a specific protein, we can make a copy of that segment, and then that will become an RNA, and that's a single strand. And then that RNA strand, that nucleotides we were talking about in chemistry, those nucleotides are stacked up one after the other, and that then becomes that strand. And then that strand goes out of the core of the cell where the DNA is and moves into the ribosome, and that's where it then makes the protein. And so that's where you will learn that in this process right here, protein synthesis. And so that's very interesting how we can make DNA useful. What is DNA really for, right? It's really mostly a cookbook for protein. And so how then do we make that protein from that cookbook? That's what this protein synthesis part talks about. And that's one of the main components in this chapter. So make sure you understand that. And if it's too hard, if you don't at the end of watching these videos, then we can get together and look at it. Just shoot me a text if you want to make some, Zoom session or so, and I'll see if I can roll together a few people, if anybody else has a similar issue, and then we'll go on Zoom together. Or just, as a tutoring, that's fine too. Anyway, so then the last thing, no, not quite the last thing here, the cell division is an important thing, because if we want to have growth, we need to divide these cells. We also need to divide them because they get old and we need to replace them. So when we multiply, in a cell world, we don't make from a bigger one to a baby and then the baby grows. No, we make from 1 to 2. We make from 1 to 2 daughter cells. So we have to accumulate all the different genetic, not that too, yeah, but we have to accumulate the organelles, all the mitochondria and all that, and grow bigger, that we can eventually chop it in half and have enough on both cells to start, a life again in a cell. But what we really have to do is we have to really make sure that the genetic material, the DNA, is very, very perfectly copied. And each cell, daughter cell, will have one copy available to it, to then, be its full cell again. And so when we look at cell division, the biggest component here is how do we divide that DNA material appropriately, that it ends up one-on-one in both sides of the cell. And so that's what mitosis is really about. And so, go through the sequences and these words and all of that, and look at the pictures and get a sense of it. Of course, understand that the pictures are showing faces. It's really a continuous process, or then it's happening. That's actually where that video is really cool, that TED Talk. It's like 10 minutes, the TED Talk. It's not that long. If you can't find it and you want to shoot me a text, I'll send it to everyone. I have it somewhere loaded as a link. And then lastly, in this chapter, we'll talk about transport. We talk about things going in and out of the cell, and how that happens. And so we have a few of them. We have a simple diffusion. That's when you put a sugar cube in a tea and you don't even stir it. You just wait until everything dissolves. Actually, you can stir it, and that will go a little faster. And then we have a facilitated diffusion. The second one, that means it's a helped diffusion, which means that's like the glucose in the cell. That's where that glucose question comes in interestingly handy. Actually, the glucose is very interesting, because you have in the cell membrane, you have like channels that can open and close, and they are very specific for glucose. The only glucose molecules can go in and out of those. Well, in, not out. Well, theoretically, they can go in and out, actually. And so when that protein channel is open, that's when insulin is attached to. And so that's where insulin as a hormone comes in. And then all the glucose from the bloodstream goes into the cell. It gets sucked into the cell because it's really diffusion. It's a gradient. It's a suction question. It's like, what that means is, if you have a lot of glucose on one side of the well, let's say if you put glucose in a tea, you put sugar in a tea, and it's all at the bottom, the sugar wants to go and get throughout the whole water and be evenly distributed in the whole water, it doesn't want to just sit in the bottom. And so tendentially, that's what it's going to do. It's just going to take a long time if you don't stir it, but it's still going to do that. And so that's like the diffusion process where molecules want to be distributed evenly within a whole solution. And that's also across the cell membrane if there is that channel protein. So if you have a lot of glucose on the outside of the cell and that protein channel is open, these proteins, glucose, these glucose will all get sucked into the cell. And then what's really cool, this is where the body is so ingenious. What it does, as they come in, these glucose, is the cell attaches a little molecule to the glucose. I think it's a phosphate actually from an ATP or ADP, and then it's altered and it's no longer recognized as a glucose molecule. And therefore, as long as this channel lets glucose in is open, it will always suck the glucose in that's in the bloodstream, because it never balances out between how much is on the inside and the outside if the cell doesn't recognize it as a glucose anymore once it's on the inside. Does that make sense? Anybody?
Yes.
Good, because
Yes, makes sense.
okay, because it's kind of cool how the body works, but it can get a little trippy in the head. Anyway, so that's the diffusion. So it's pretty a passive process. And to finish up the glucose, the problem with insulin resistance then becomes those receptors were on those channel proteins. There's these receptors for insulin. They don't respond anymore, and these channels don't open anymore, and they don't let the glucose in anymore. And that's the big problem. That is the diabetes problem. It's a wear out problem. And so you can wear out the channels, the receptors, and you can also wear out the pancreas where the insulin is made as well. And then we have other ones. We have osmosis, and osmosis is interesting. Osmosis is like the diffusion of water molecules, when instead of the molecules that move inside a solution or across the cell membrane or so, in osmosis, it's the water that moves, and the molecules are too large; they stay behind. And so the body still wants to balance. You can see that, for example, if you look at the bloodstream, like the heart pumps the blood into the body, and then a lot of the body seeps into the tissues to give the tissues the nutrients and the oxygen and all that good stuff, and picks up the stuff that's used up, all the carbon dioxide and all the thing we need to get rid of, the used up elements. But then, have you ever wondered how in the world is that blood that is seeped into the tissues going to come back into the bloodstream, the blood vessel, and then get pumped back into the heart, and then the heart can pump it to the lungs and pick up oxygen and make that process go around, a lot of times in a lifetime. And how that happens, how you can bring that fluid that gets seeped into the tissues back into the bloodstream, into the vessels, is you keep some substances, some protein particles behind in the blood vessel, and they then act like suctions and suck the liquid back into the blood vessel. You can see that phenomenon if you take a tomato and you cut it and you put salt on it. And after a few minutes, instead of salt crystals, you have droplets of water, because the salt pulls the water out of the tomato. And so that's osmosis as a process. And then the last thing is filtration. And you probably, if you drink coffee or anything like that, you know what filtration looks like. It's just you have a filter that not everything goes through, and some things you stay behind. So that has then to do about how large a molecule are. Like, for example, you can use that process in the kidneys, and the kidneys are a filter for the blood. And so the kidneys filter the whole blood through these filters. They're actually cells with feet, they're slits, and then not everything can go through. And so that's a filtering system. So that would be filtration. So again, the larger molecules by size, how big they are, stay behind, and most of the fluid goes through it. And that's how we can clean. And then most of the fluid that's gone through the filter will be pulled back into the bloodstream later on in the kidneys. But that's how we filter the blood in the kidneys and make pee, of course, also. And so that's a very good example where we use filtration. And then besides these processes, these are all processes that are passive, so they don't need energy. When we say passive, we're thinking in terms of energy. And the good news is anything that is passive in the body that doesn't use energy is free, is cheap, and is functioning much more resiliently or consistently than if it needs ATP, because we might run out of ATP. We don't know. So it's kind of like you got a hill and you're on top of the hill and you go down, or at the bottom of the hill and go up. Which one uses more energy? The downhill is definitely the easier one, especially if you have something with wheels. And then the other processes we have are the active ones. That means we need ATP, we need energy to move the bicycle up the hill or push a molecule against a concentration gradient. I often use the Tokyo subways in that, where there's so many people and you got the pushers that have to squeeze everybody into the car, and on the other station, when the doors open, everybody falls out. Oh, not quite, but get the idea. But that's sort of like where it needs a lot of energy to squeeze it all in. We can use this active thing very, very ingeniously again, the body. It has these pumps, for example, right here, these pumps. And so in the nervous system, for example, when we need to shoot a nerve impulse, like when you hit your funny bone and that nerve fire goes down to the pinky, that's a nerve impulse. And so to create that signal, that spark, we need to have molecules cross the cell membrane that have a charge on it. Like an electron difference is a charge, because the electron is what's going to carry that energy, that spark, or the ion. That's the ion then. And so what we do in the nervous system, we create very, very high concentration of the ion sodium right on the outside of the cell membrane of that nerve that needs that nerve cable. This is cell membrane around every little cable. And so very, very much sodium right on the outside. And then when we need to shoot the nerve impulse, we don't need to passively shove these sodiums to the other side slowly, and the nerve goes like, okay, let's get started now. No, if we're ready to shoot, we can just open the gates for sodium, and these charged molecules rush into the nerve, and that's the nerve impulse. Then that change in polarity, in that charge inside to the outside in comparison, that's voltage, and then that creates a nerve impulse. So that's kind of a really cool example how the body uses a active transport, these pumps, to create a situation that it then can just do one little thing and create a big change. And then that would be like a nerve impulse, for example, which is a big change. I mean, hit that funny bone, that's pretty intense, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay, good. Is that helpful, or is that just blah, blah?
Yes, it's helpful.
Okay, good. Well, because with that pretty much closes this chapter out in terms of the cells. And then, oh shoot, I didn't go through the tissues. Let's see. The tissues gets easier. It gets easier and easier. So tissues we can do really quickly. Just give you a review, a quick thing what we're talking about. We're talking about mainly about we have 4 tissues in our body, and tissues you're thinking of, they're like similar looking cells, similar looking structurally things. And I never really understood what that means. They talk about the tissues being the fabrics in the body that then make organs and things. But that's still, maybe that was because I was ESL, but it was kind of hard. But it is kind of like in that way. If you, for example, if you're looking at a muscle is a lot of fibers, they're red, that have very specific proteins in them that just contract. That's all a muscle really needs to do, is contract. And so that's a very specific type of cells, and then conglomerates of cells, and then that's a tissue. So muscle tissue is one of the 4 main types of tissue. The other one is nerve tissue. And that's also, very specific. The brain. You just visualize a brain, and then what we just talked about, that nerve impulse shooting thing. That's how the nervous system works. And ultimately, and then, if we create thought and so forth, it's just the way it all is organized. And we'll talk about all of that when we talk about the brain. And it's really cool stuff. But that's also its own specific tissue types. So we talk about those when we talk about muscles, when we talk about nerves. And then the other 2 tissue types that we have are One is epithelial, called epithelial tissue, right up here. And the other one is called connective tissue. Oh, and if you talk about tissues, if you want to use the proper terminology, scientifically it's called histology. And ology is always a love for knowledge. I think it's really what it is. It's a love for knowledge. And I'm not sure where the term histo comes from, but it's tissue. And so epithelial tissue is anything, if you visualize it, first you got to visualize it. Everything else is like blah, blah, difficult if we don't visualize it. So what it does, we need to, where is it? Where do we find it? And so epithelial tissue we find wherever we cover something. Hold on. All right, there it is. Wherever we cover something, like the skin, we cover the body with the skin, or we cover the organ with the tissue. That's going to be epithelial. We have a lining, we have glands, and we have receptors. Receptors are like you poking my face. That's a receptor that picks up that pressure. That's a receptor, temperature or pain or all that kind of stuff. Are receptors in the nervous system, and then transduce that into nerve energy. So in the nervous system, the interesting thing is the receptor itself is actually epithelial tissue, but everything else is its own tissue type. And so what we do afterwards, we talk about the function. What does it do? Protect, absorb, secrete. So we'll go through examples. And then we have characteristics. So these are all the bullet points that I want you sort of to know at the end of watching those videos. There is hardly anything on the test in this chapter, so don't stress too much about the information. I want you to understand it as well as possible, but we're getting more and more tangible. For example, like the epithelial tissue is characterized by it's very cell. It has cell after cell after cell. It has nothing in between the cells. It looks different on the top and on the bottom. And then you get into example, you understand the skin is going to look different on the top of the skin and where it goes to the outside versus the bottom that's attached to the rest of the body. And so it becomes things like that. I want you to just listen to the audio and go through the quiz on it a few times. And then if you have questions left, then shoot me a text and we can clear up those pieces on that. The other tissue types is connective tissue. And connective tissue is anything that connects anything with each other. So it's really a broad variety of a tissue type, of a fabric type. And like blood is connective tissue, but also bone is connective tissue. It's like, who can visualize that? But what's important about that tissue type is that we have different things that make it up. And in that tissue type, we mostly have cells that make up the tissue. And then we have things outside of the cells, extracellular matrix that's called. And that one is composed of fibers and so-called ground substance. So in the bone, for example, the fibers are collagen fibers and the ground substance calcium. So that's why it's hard. It's like bricks. But the fibers make it flexible bricks. And then the cells also are in there. They're osteocytes, and they create all of that. They make the matrix. They make that brick stuff, the calcium, and make sure everything is layered up the right way, and they maintain it. In the blood, the extracellular matrix, the ground substance is water. That's why it's fluid. But we also have fibers in them. In the blood, the fiber is insoluble. But when we cut the blood vessel and we need to patch it up, then it has to become soluble. And we're going to talk about that in the blood chapter. That's a really interesting thing about coagulation. No, I think is that blood chapter or maybe immune system chapter or something. But it also has those components, and then of course we have a bunch of cells in the blood. We have red blood cells and white blood cells, and so it has the same components. So I want you to go through that and learn about the basics about the connective tissue, and then we finish the chapter off with bone and cartilage, because that gives us the segue then into the bone, the next part of the class, which is the bone and the muscles. And again, with these things, listen to the videos and do the quizzes. It becomes conceptually speaking more and more visualizable. And so hopefully my hope is that makes it a little easier to understand from the videos. But if you have questions, I'm here for you guys. I can, tune in and we can talk about it if you have things coming on. And then other than that, this week, let's see what else we have going on in terms of the work. Week 3. Not too much. We have a little more concept, and this one is actually the mitosis and the protein synthesis. Those two things I want you to think a little bit more and write about it or make a video about it. And then every health kit has a little discussion around it. Not much to spend too much time. Just have a 10 minutes or so and reflect on what was the experience about the food label, and then give us a little video on it, or it has a couple of prompts. What did you learn, and so forth on it, but nothing too fancy. Then the one that is a little fancier this week that I want you to do is actually a hands-on experience thing. If you have kids, you can do it with the kids. I want you to just get a little deeper in the organelle understanding, and I want you to do a cell with household things, food items, batteries, whatever you feel like represents a little bit, visually represents a organelle of the ones listed here somewhere. They're somewhere listed in here. Where were they? Here we go: cell membrane, cytosol, nucleus, etc., etc. See these ones. I want you to write a little legend and indicate what is what and what does it mean. A little legend next to it or something, and then that helps you in get that learning down a little from the intellectual, just reading a word and maybe writing it. That's all new stuff to making something with it, and gives you guys, if you haven't experienced those as adults lately, a way to see how that hands-on learning is, because when my philosophy of learning is, I've learned that from my mentor from the 1800s. You got to include the head, the heart, and the hand. So whenever you have a tangible thing you can do with your learning material, it really, really settles in the brain much, much easier and better. And it's not really necessary the first thing you think about college way, but it really works that way. Anyway, so I think that's it. And then we finish up with a Padlet. And that's the end of that. Any questions or comments? Anybody still there, or did you guys all leave?
No,
Okay, good. Well, if you don't have any questions, if it's all crystal blurry clear, then we can call it a week. And I'm going to go back and have me some food down there at my restaurant.
I do have one question.
Yes.
Because I know you were saying about what is that? The tips and questions. So you want us to just put our name at the bottom after we write each post?
Yes.
Okay.
Just do that. Then that way it's because actually the other thing is, if I've realized too, if you access it within the Canvas app, you never see the names anyway. It always somehow comes as anonymous. So if we're just doing it with the name, since it's hard to get in, we'll just be good with that, if that's okay.
Okay.
If you actually listen to if you do the name, do the first letter of your last name too. That makes it easier for me to allocate. Although I'm gonna learn all your names and last names. This comes in anyway, but I'll make it a little easier for me. But
and then I noticed on one of the posts, the Spotlight Scientists, I believe. My initial reply, it didn't do like the whole it didn't do the whole post, so I had to go in and do it again.
Okay. That's okay.
Yeah, okay.
Did
And I
you
just
let me
noticed
know
that.
if I didn't do the grading right? Let me know and shoot me a text.
Okay, I will.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Anybody else?
Well, this is kind of unrelated to the class, but when you said, "Is this work? Is this like Is this?" I think you said, "Is this working or is this only blah blah blah?" No, thank you for the things you're doing for the class, and thank you for taking your time.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Or like, we appreciate your time and your explanations. They're really really helpful, even though we're sometimes sort of shy, but we appreciate you.
Thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I appreciate all you guys participating, especially, and also, speaking up and asking questions. It's and I know, because I know it's hard. It's on Zoom. It's a little like goofy, weird. You don't
Yeah.
see each other in person. But we will go to the classroom on the 19th. It's not this week, but it's gonna be coming up pretty soon. Not next week, then the following. Yeah.
I'm really excited.
Yeah, me too. Totally.
One of my friends took your class.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say that one of my friends took your class and she said that it was pretty cool.
Oh, good. Well, we got it last semester.
Yeah.
Good, because I'm slowly learning what to do in the classroom again. That be coming into after the pandemic,
And then,
because just standing there and lecturing, that's too boring. Yes,
Doctor, you said what which day are we coming in for lab?
I got to start mainly on. We definitely coming on Monday, but if I have enough people, we will also come in on Wednesday.
Okay, because I think you were saying what date were we actually coming in? Because I think
2/19
so I
is
have
the
a
start date.
You said the what day?
2/19.
The
February
19th. Okay, so the 19th we have that off as a holiday, but I'm going to send you a picture of the schedule.
Oh shoot! Well, that's all right. Well, then thank you for bringing that up. Then we're just gonna have to make that on the Wednesday that day.
Okay, I'll send you a picture of.
Yeah, do that, please.
I think it's President's Weekend or something. That Wednesday sounds good, Dr. M.
Wednesday's all right for that week.
21st, right? Yes.
Then we just do the Wednesday that week, and I'll make sure I organize that, and then follow up week we can see, huh? But generally, what I do is I have Monday and Wednesday, but I have Monday, and then when we have enough students, we can also open Wednesday. Because it's been a little not that easy for people to want to come back. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, good. Okay, good. Anybody else? Any other question? No, I don't want to close it out. I'm good here. I can talk for a while.
No, that'll be it. But I sent that schedule over to you for spring.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. I missed that. Yeah. Thanks so much for helping me with these kind of things. The admin stuff is where it's not always easy for me, so I need all the help I can get. All right, how everybody else doing? Should we close it out, or you guys have anything left?
Just one more question, Dr. M.
Absolutely.
For those of us who didn't get the book yet or the booklet, when will you're in Oakland on Tuesdays?
I'll be Oakland Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, and the rest of the times I'm in Walnut Creek.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, sir.
Cool. Just text me and I'll have some with me.
Thank you.
Super. Thank you, guys. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you. Have a wonderful week, and not be shy.